The waitress said something that made the restaurant freeze after being yelled at by the millionaire. The sudden hush that enveloped the Metropolitan, one of Manhattan's most exclusive dining establishments, was absolute, a silence so profound it stole the breath from every patron. Waiters froze mid-stride, diners gently set down their forks, and the pianist's fingers hovered motionlessly above the keys. All gazes converged on a corner table, where Richard Sterling, a figure of impeccable dress and immense wealth, glared at the trembling waitress, Sophia. His voice, a booming crescendo, lacerated the air, demanding an impossible perfection, disparaging her every effort, and seething with an unrestrained impatience. No one in the opulent room dared to utter a sound, until Sophia, her eyes locking with his, spoke a single sentence. It was a declaration so utterly unexpected, so arresting, that it seemed to wrench time itself to a complete standstill. In that profound moment, Sophia's life would irrevocably shift. Sophia, at 28, had never been one to invite drama into her existence. She navigated the arduous demands of 2 jobs, a crushing burden of student loan debt, and the boundless energy of her spirited 7-year-old daughter, Lily, whose constant pleas for dance lessons echoed through their tiny apartment. Such was the ceaseless rhythm of life in New York City. When the Metropolitan, a Michelin-starred sanctuary nestled in the heart of Manhattan, extended an offer for a part-time position, Sophia seized the opportunity with a desperate eagerness. The tips alone, she reasoned, could keep her afloat in a city where fortunes flowed in overwhelming currents but rarely settled among the working class. Perched on the upper floor of an elegant pre-war edifice, the Metropolitan was celebrated for its innovative French-Asian fusion menu and an unwritten dress code that subtly turned away even the slightest sartorial misstep. The staff, attired in crisp black and white uniforms with meticulously embroidered lapels, were trained to an uncompromising standard of excellence. The venerable chef Antoine Dubois, it was whispered, had once honed his craft under a celebrated maestro in Paris, and rumors abounded that luminaries like Taylor Swift or even Mr. David Chen had discreetly graced its tables for private meals. The immense pressure that accompanied such renown was extraordinary, yet Sophia clung to the belief that the job was worth every ounce of effort. The compensation was respectable, the potential tips life-altering, and the environment undeniably polished. As a single mother fueled by an indomitable will, she braced herself for the monumental challenge. Each day, Sophia arrived 2 hours before her shift, dedicating herself to the meticulous setup, precisely aligning silverware, polishing wine glasses until they shimmered like facets of diamond beneath the chandeliers, and imprinting every nuance of the day's complex menu into her memory. She quickly grasped that if Chef Antoine Dubois was in a less than sanguine mood, the entire staff needed to anticipate his every request with an almost prescient intuition. If the sommelier had a particular vintage to recommend, they had to be prepared to articulate its qualities flawlessly. Every minute detail mattered, from the elegant precision of their walk, to the graceful manner in which they held a plate, to the tone and substance of their interaction with each discerning diner. She often found herself utterly exhausted at the close of every shift, yet an unexpected sense of profound satisfaction invigorated her spirit. There was an inexplicable allure in the act of delivering a flawless service, something she likened to the intricate beauty of a dance routine, where every step, every gesture, was meticulously choreographed, every phrase practiced, every smile genuine yet carefully measured. Within a mere few weeks, Sophia found her rhythm, settling comfortably into her new role. She effortlessly charmed couples celebrating cherished anniversaries, corporate groups toasting lucrative deals, and affluent out-of-towners yearning for a taste of Manhattan's rarefied luxury. A thrill coursed through her when her inaugural significant tip arrived, a crisp $200 from a discerning hedge fund manager who greatly admired her profound knowledge of vintage Bordeaux. That precious tip went directly into Lily's dance dreams, piggy bank, a symbol of their shared aspirations. Outside the gilded confines of the restaurant, Sophia's world was decidedly more modest. Her tiny apartment in Queens was a cozy, intimate one-bedroom sanctuary, where Lily slept soundly in a corner lovingly partitioned by a soft lavender curtain. The living room seamlessly transformed into their dining space, and the kitchen, barely large enough for her to turn around in, still served its purpose. Yet, they made the absolute most of every inch, adorning each corner with Lily's vibrant drawings of princesses and cherished photographs of exotic locales they ardently dreamed of visiting one day. Despite the ceaseless challenges, Sophia remained unyielding in her determination to provide her daughter with a life that stretched far beyond meager paychecks and cramped quarters. This new position at the Metropolitan felt like a definitive step in the right direction. So, when she clocked in that fateful Saturday evening, she had no inkling that her life was poised for an irreversible transformation. It was a particularly bustling night, with reservations fully booked, largely, as Mr. Harrison, the maitre d', described, by influential figures. This usually signified CEOs, high-profile attorneys, or perhaps even a celebrity discreetly hidden beneath a baseball cap. The entire staff remained on heightened alert, as whispers circulated that a particularly notable millionaire might grace their establishment with his presence. Chef Antoine Dubois paced restlessly in the kitchen, triple-checking fresh, exotic ingredients flown in from across the globe. The sous chefs, with a precision bordering on surgical, prepped dishes. This was the precise night Richard Sterling strode through the grand doors of the Metropolitan. Known to the media as a reclusive millionaire who seldom granted interviews, Richard had amassed his colossal fortune in advanced predictive software, coveted by governments and corporations alike. He held the exclusive patent for a groundbreaking algorithm utilized in everything from intricate stock market analysis to sophisticated facial recognition. Tabloids feasted voraciously whenever he was cited, reporting on every minute detail, from his choice of bespoke suits to the mysterious women occasionally glimpsed by his side. Some sensationally labeled him the next Elon Musk, others proclaimed him the new Mark Zuckerberg. Many characterized him as brilliantly intelligent yet utterly ruthless, a man who allegedly valued his time and immense wealth above all human decency. Yet, to the dedicated staff of the Metropolitan, he was simply Table 9 tonight, and that, according to the restaurant's unyielding code of conduct, was all that truly mattered. Sophia, having diligently studied the intricate seating chart, recognized him as a last-minute VIP addition, precisely the kind of patron who might unblinkingly drop 4 figures on a single bottle of rare wine. She wasn't initially assigned to serve Table 9, but fate, as it often does, possesses a peculiar and unpredictable sense of humor. The restaurant buzzed with the frenetic energy of a hive on the precipice of chaos. Waiters glided across the dining floor like expertly choreographed dancers, swift, silent, and remarkably efficient. Every single seat was occupied, the delicate clink of glasses, the soft rustle of linen napkins, and the subdued hum of polite conversation intermingling harmoniously with the gentle, undulating notes of live piano music. Sophia's assigned section for the evening had originally encompassed tables 5 and 6 and 7, none of them particularly noteworthy. Table 5 hosted a charming couple celebrating their 20th wedding anniversary. Table 6 was occupied by a solitary diner, far more engrossed in reading his thick biography of Abraham Lincoln than in any form of socializing. Table 7 consisted of a small, refined group of art dealers politely engaged in discussions about an upcoming auction. Sophia had just flawlessly delivered amuse-bouches, a trio of exquisitely delicate canapés, to each table without a single incident. So far, so good. Then came the unexpected twist. Mark, the waiter originally assigned to Table 9, slipped silently into the kitchen. It all transpired with a disorienting speed. He was meticulously carrying a tray laden with champagne flutes, heading directly for the VIP section, when a rogue garnish of microgreens inadvertently fell to the polished floor, causing him to lose his precarious footing. Mark tumbled, the flutes and champagne crashing in a spectacular, sparkling arc. He twisted his ankle severely. Mr. Harrison rushed forward, his face anxious and noticeably pale, while Chef Antoine Dubois let out an audible gasp of alarm from behind the pass. In that frantic, adrenaline-fueled moment, Mr. Harrison quickly scanned the bustling restaurant for a suitable replacement. Another server had just commenced her well-deserved break. Another was completely overwhelmed, bogged down with a 12-top table in the opposite corner of the room. His gaze swiftly landed on Sophia. "Sophia," he commanded, his voice edged with urgency, "you're up." She blinked, her heart hammering wildly in her chest. She was undeniably nervous, but the unspoken rule at the Metropolitan was unyielding, an absolute decree: you never, under any circumstances, question an order, especially not in the direct presence of guests. She nodded curtly, retrieved an open tray, and mentally prepared herself to serve Richard Sterling, the reclusive millionaire rumored to be as demanding as he was powerful. Taking a deep, calming breath, she approached table 9. Richard Sterling appeared no older than 45, tall and broad-shouldered, with neatly styled salt-and-pepper hair. He wore a custom-tailored navy suit, subtly pinstriped, that likely cost more than a year of Sophia's rent. His wrist displayed a watch that gleamed with an understated opulence, something Swiss, no doubt. Next to him sat a business associate, slighter in build, equally well-dressed, whose name Sophia would later learn was David Miller. Surrounding them were two formidable bodyguards, seated at separate tables, attempting with futility to appear inconspicuous, but failing miserably given their perfectly matching black suits and discreet earpieces. Sophia approached, her posture meticulously aligned, her eyes calm and unwavering. A faint, polite smile graced her lips. "Good evening," she said, her voice steady and composed. "Welcome to the Metropolitan. My name is Sophia, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with our signature cocktails, or would you prefer to see the wine list?" Richard glanced at her, barely acknowledging her presence. She could discern the subtle flicker of annoyance in his steel-gray eyes, presumably a lingering irritation from the minor commotion surrounding the champagne fiasco. David Miller offered a polite, apologetic smile, but Richard uttered nothing. "Wine list," he muttered, his fingers flying across his phone screen with impatient speed. "Make it quick, and if you have a good vintage of Riesling, bring that." He did not bother to look up. Sophia nodded and quickly hurried to fetch the wine list, consciously ignoring the tightening knot of anxiety forming in her stomach. She sternly reminded herself that as a server, her paramount duty was to remain calm, professional, and gracious, regardless of who occupied the table before her. This was the unwritten creed that she and her colleagues lived by daily: be invisible when needed, be supportive when invited, and always, always maintain an unshakable composure. She made a mental note to quickly check the cellar for the recommended Riesling that Chef Antoine Dubois had so enthusiastically raved about. Perhaps it might manage to please him and somehow brighten his sour mood. Returning to table 9, she meticulously presented the list. "We have an excellent Riesling from Napa Valley," she suggested in her most polite and measured tone. "It's a 2001 vintage, quite rare, with delicate notes of peach, apricot, and a crisp mineral finish. Chef Antoine Dubois speaks very highly of it. I believe it would pair beautifully with tonight's specials." Richard paused, then abruptly tossed the wine list aside, as if it were a trivial distraction. He had not once made direct eye contact with her. "Fine, bring it," he snapped. "But let's not waste time with the cheap stuff. I can pay for quality." Sophia nodded, forced a mild, unconvincing smile, and silently stepped away. In the brief moments she spent fetching the bottle and retrieving the precisely correct glassware, she felt a sharp pang of anxiety. There was nothing inherently unusual about demanding guests, some even verging on outright hostility, but there was an unsettling aura emanating from Richard Sterling, an almost palpable electricity in the air that made her profoundly uneasy. Perhaps it was the sheer magnitude of his wealth, or the swirling vortex of rumors about his intimidating personality. Or perhaps it was simply the unsettling reality that she was relatively new to serving such high-profile clients at the Metropolitan. Either way, she knew with chilling certainty that a single misstep could quickly lead to a nightmarish, interminable shift. She meticulously carried out the bottle presentation, carefully showing Richard the label. He impatiently waved it off, allowing her to pour a small sample into his glass. He took a sip, pursed his lips thoughtfully, and nodded curtly. So far, so good. However, when she attempted to eloquently describe the evening specials, he abruptly cut her off mid-sentence. "Stop wasting my time with pleasantries," he said sharply. "Can we just order? I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Bring me the Wagyu beef, seared rare, black garlic sauce on the side, no garnish, and a side of truffle mashed potatoes. Make it happen quickly." Her heart quickened its pace. The Metropolitan prided itself on its elegant plating, all dishes meticulously arranged with delicate garnishes and thoughtful accompaniments. But she had no choice in the matter. "Of course, sir," she said, managing to keep her face perfectly neutral. Turning to David Miller, she politely inquired about his order. He looked profoundly uncomfortable, as though he disliked the palpable tension but was resigned to diligently following Richard's lead. He ordered a bouillabaisse and politely thanked her. As Sophia disappeared into the bustling kitchen to place their urgent orders, she felt the oppressive tension throbbing painfully in her chest. Other staff members furtively whispered about the scene unfolding at table 9. Chef Antoine Dubois was particularly anxious, personally tending to Richard Sterling's meal, desperately wanting to ensure that if this formidable millionaire ever harbored thoughts of investing in a new gastronomic venture, the Metropolitan would undoubtedly be the very first establishment on his list. Unbeknownst to her, the true drama was only just beginning to unfurl. While Richard Sterling slowly sipped his prized Riesling, the rest of the Metropolitan's sprawling dining room remained a whirlwind of refined activity. Waiters delicately balanced gleaming silver-domed trays, the pianist's melodic tunes floated serenely on the air, and well-heeled patrons murmured softly amongst themselves. Yet, an insidious undercurrent of tension visibly crept outward from table 9, spreading like ominous ripples across a placid pond. Sophia was diligently occupied, checking on her other tables. She refilled a champagne glass for the anniversary couple, patiently answered a question about sauce pairings for the art dealers, and politely asked the solo diner if he desired dessert. Despite juggling multiple, demanding requests, she found herself unable to escape the looming sense of dread. She knew with chilling certainty that she would have to return to Richard Sterling's table soon, and her stomach twisted uncomfortably at the mere thought. When Chef Antoine Dubois rang the bell, signaling that table 9's dishes were ready, Sophia swiftly gathered the plates with practiced, efficient grace. The Wagyu beef glistened, expertly seared, with the rich black garlic sauce presented in a small ramekin on the side. The truffle mashed potatoes were elegantly piped, though the garnish had been omitted precisely as requested. Chef Antoine Dubois had not been pleased, but Richard's demands were absolute and unquestionable. Beside that, the fragrant bouillabaisse, redolent with saffron, ripe tomatoes, and delicate pieces of shellfish, awaited. Sophia emerged from the kitchen and made her way smoothly through the tables, her head held high with an almost defiant poise. As she arrived at table 9, she gently placed the wagyu before Richard, then carefully set down the bouillabaisse in front of David Miller. "I hope you enjoy your meal," she said softly, stepping back to maintain the polite, deferential distance required. For a few interminable minutes, Richard picked up his cutlery and began to eat, completely ignoring Sophia's presence. She half expected him to bark some complaint about the temperature or presentation, but to her profound surprise, he seemed too deeply absorbed in his own thoughts to speak. Instead, she observed David's discreet nod, acknowledging the quality of the bouillabaisse, and felt a fleeting sense of relief. But just when she dared to hope that she might somehow glide through the service unscathed, Richard's face suddenly hardened. He set down his fork with a sharp clatter, leaned back in his chair, and pushed the plate away with an abrupt, dismissive gesture. "Waitress," he barked, looking directly at Sophia for the very first time that evening. Her heart lurched violently at his commanding, aggressive tone, but she approached, meticulously maintaining a calm, professional demeanor. "Yes, sir," she answered, trying desperately not to let her burgeoning apprehension show. Richard gestured imperiously to the steak, his expression stormy and irate. "This is raw," he snarled. "I asked for rare, not raw. Are you trying to give me food poisoning or something?" Sophia swallowed hard, her throat tight. She knew with absolute certainty that Chef Antoine Dubois's cooking was impeccable, beyond reproach. The internal temperature of that wagyu would have been precisely what Richard had requested, executed to perfection. But a server, she knew, never, ever argued in front of a guest. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir," she said, her voice measured and composed. "I can have it taken back to the kitchen and cooked further to your liking." He let out a mirthless, scornful laugh, loud enough to cause a few heads at nearby tables to turn curiously. "Cooked further? I shouldn't have to repeat myself. This place is supposed to be top tier. You should know how to serve a steak properly." Sophia breathed in and out slowly, steadily, a silent anchor. She reminded herself of little Lily back home, of the rent that desperately needed paying, of the tips she so utterly relied on to survive. "I understand," she said softly. "Let me fix this for you immediately." "Chef Antoine Dubois." "Well, I don't want excuses," Richard snapped, his voice sharp and unyielding. "I want solutions, now. And while you're at it, bring another bottle of that Riesling, and hurry." David Miller glanced apologetically at Sophia, but he remained silent, utterly helpless. The tension in the dining area visibly thickened, growing almost palpable. Nearby patrons shifted uncomfortably, uncertain whether to continue watching the unfolding drama or pretend they hadn't noticed a thing. Sophia felt her cheeks flush with heat, but she meticulously maintained her poised, professional posture. "Yes, sir," she said, lifting the plate and turning to leave. Only then did the millionaire raise his voice, addressing the entire restaurant. "For a place like this to mess up a simple steak is ridiculous. Do you realize how much money is spent to dine here? You'd think they'd hire competent staff." A stunned hush fell among the diners as Richard's furious outburst reverberated harshly against the elegantly paneled walls. Murmurs of confusion and disbelief began to rise among the crowd. David Miller placed a hesitant hand on Richard's shoulder, attempting to calm him, but Richard irritably shrugged him off. Sophia's ears burned with a searing shame. It was one thing to be quietly berated, but quite another to be publicly humiliated, to be made a spectacle of. Her composure fractured for a fleeting moment, a flash of profound hurt crossing her face. However, years of navigating relentless hardship had forged in her an unshakable resilience, teaching her to remain calm under the most intense provocation. She disappeared into the kitchen, quietly asking Chef Antoine Dubois to cook the steak just a tad longer, and then retrieved another pristine bottle of Riesling. The chef, though furious at Richard's baseless accusation of rawness and openly questioning if the man even grasped the meaning of rare, knew their hands were tied. The customer, especially a millionaire with the power to make or break reputations, was always unequivocally right. Sophia returned with the updated Wagyu and the fresh bottle, carefully displaying it for Richard's approval. He offered no sign of courtesy, merely lifting his glass for a refill as she poured. Tension lines creased his forehead, and his voice dripped with an unconcealed disdain. She set the steak in front of him. "I hope this is to your satisfaction," she said, biting back any trace of an edge in her tone. He glowered at her, but then, without another word, he cut into the meat. He took a bite, then nodded curtly. Finally, he muttered. Then he added, "You should have done it right the first time." His voice echoed harshly through the quiet room. A few patrons now stared openly, while others pretended to be completely absorbed in their own meals, desperately trying to ignore the palpable tension. The pianist continued playing, now more softly, more hesitantly, striving in vain to maintain some semblance of ambience. Richard's eyes flicked up at Sophia. "Well, what are you waiting for? You can go." She inclined her head slightly and stepped away, feeling her pulse racing wildly in her ears. Before she could take more than 3 steps, he barked again, "Waitress." She froze, turning slowly, her breath held. His phone buzzed urgently on the table. He glanced at it, reading a text, and then glared at Sophia as though she had personally offended him in some profound way. "Get me the check, now," he ordered. "And get your manager over here." Sophia's stomach plummeted. This, she knew, could not be good. She hurried to Mr. Harrison, who immediately tensed at the request. Managers rarely appeared tableside unless there was a significant issue, and for a VIP like Richard Sterling, damage control had to be swift and utterly thorough. Mr. Harrison smoothed his jacket and joined Sophia, approaching table 9 with careful, practiced diplomacy. Richard wasted no time, launching into a furious tirade about the incompetent service, how his steak was subpar, and how his precious time had been wasted. Mr. Harrison attempted to mollify him, apologizing profusely and promising to remove the Wagyu from the bill. It was then that the dreaded moment arrived. Richard turned directly to Sophia, his face contorted with scorn, and unleashed an insult-laden diatribe that rose sharply above the gentle hum of the dining room. "This waitress is clueless," he fumed. "She can't follow simple instructions. She wasted my evening, brought me raw meat, and I'm paying top dollar. Unacceptable. I don't care if she's new or incompetent. People like her shouldn't be allowed in places like this. I've run companies with thousands of employees, and if any one of them performed like she did tonight, I'd have them fired on the spot." The entire restaurant fell into an unnerving silence. A profound hush blanketed the dining room, as though someone had suddenly pressed a pause button on life itself. Every single pair of eyes fixed intently on Richard Sterling, stunned into disbelief by the sheer ferocity of his outburst. The gentle chatter from other tables died away completely. Forks and knives clattered to a standstill, and even the pianist's fingers froze motionless on the keys. David Miller was red-faced, staring fixedly down at his half-eaten bouillabaisse, clearly wishing he could simply melt into the polished floor. Sophia stood rigidly, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm in her ears. Her cheeks burned with a dual flush of humiliation and burgeoning anger. She struggled desperately to keep her emotions in check, to maintain the professional facade. The entire staff watched, helpless, as this towering man verbally pummeled her, proclaiming to the world that she was worthless, incompetent, a mere nobody. Something deep inside Sophia finally snapped. She had spent years habitually turning the other cheek, silently enduring condescending customers who snapped their fingers, young students in her second job as a dance instructor complaining about fees, even the father of her child who had vanished without a trace, abandoning her to single-handedly raise Lily. She had always meticulously bottled up her frustrations, swallowing every harsh word and cutting insult, utterly convinced that meek acceptance was the sole path to survival. But in this singular, pivotal moment, with the entire restaurant openly gawking at her public humiliation, her backbone finally straightened with an almost audible click. She lifted her chin with a new resolve, looked Richard Sterling squarely in the eye for the very first time that night, and articulated a single, profound sentence that stopped all of Manhattan in its tracks. Or so it profoundly felt. "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." Her voice was remarkably calm, yet the words cleaved through the air like the sharp edge of a knife. For a suspended moment, it seemed as though time itself had truly halted. The powerful words lingered, echoing hauntingly in the silent dining room. Every person within earshot felt the visceral impact of her unvarnished statement. A wave of profound shock rippled visibly through the stunned crowd. Even Mr. Harrison was stunned into a momentary, breathless silence. Chef Antoine Dubois, peeking furtively from the kitchen, felt his heart jolt with a complex mixture of pride and dread, all at once. Richard Sterling's expression froze, a mask of disbelief. His eyes widened in a sudden surge of pure, unadulterated anger, and a deep flush began to creep visibly up his neck. No one, absolutely no one, spoke to him like this, especially not a mere waitress. After a stunned, elongated beat, he began to splutter. "What did you just say?" Sophia's newfound composure held firm. Her posture was as straight and unyielding as an arrow, her gaze unflinching. "I said, you can buy a steak, but you can't buy decency," she repeated, her voice echoing the calm, resolute conviction of someone who had finally, unequivocally, had enough. She expected an immediate, explosive eruption from him, but instead, the entire restaurant seemed to collectively hold its breath, waiting in stunned anticipation for his reaction. People slowly began to emerge from their stunned silence. A few tables tentatively began clapping, softly at first. Then, one or two bolder voices joined in, until a gentle, yet undeniable applause spread across the room like a soft, appreciative wave. It was a subtle, yet deeply tangible show of solidarity with the courageous waitress who had dared, against all odds, to speak her truth. Richard's face contorted with an uncontrolled rage. He stood abruptly, nearly knocking over his chair. The half-eaten steak before him lay completely forgotten, a casualty of his fury. "How dare you?" he roared, his voice laced with venom. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire restaurant and fire you all. I could ruin your life with a single phone call." Sophia swallowed, her pulse drumming a frantic beat, but she adamantly refused to back down. She was no fool. She fully understood the immense risk she had just taken by speaking out so boldly. She might very well lose her job, the only stable income she possessed. But in that defining moment, her hard-won self-respect far outweighed her fear. "I'm well aware of who you are, Mr. Sterling," she said quietly, her voice wavering only slightly. I also know that doesn't give you the right to treat people like they're disposable." The applause grew louder, gaining momentum. A few guests rose to their feet, nodding in emphatic agreement, a silent testament to their support. A whirlwind of profound confusion seized Mr. Harrison. On one hand, he had an undeniable duty to protect the restaurant's pristine reputation from a furious millionaire. On the other, the moral compass of every single person in that room had been profoundly rattled by Richard's vicious, indefensible behavior. The staff exchanged worried glances, uncertain of how, or if, to intervene. Richard Sterling's breathing was heavy, ragged. He jerked his furious gaze from Sophia to Mr. Harrison, then to the growing number of onlookers around him, all of whom were either silently watching with a clear sense of judgment or openly showing unwavering support for the waitress. It was a surreal moment, a tense standoff between an exceedingly wealthy man accustomed to absolute deference and a courageous woman who had finally, irrevocably, had enough of being trampled upon. "Your manager," Richard hissed, turning his blazing eyes back to Mr. Harrison. Now, Mr. Harrison stepped forward, his hands held out in a conciliatory gesture. "Mr. Sterling, please accept our apologies for any." Richard silenced him with a dismissive, raised hand. "I'm done," he said, his voice seething with an icy anger. "I won't spend another minute here. This is unacceptable. Do you realize what a public relations nightmare this is for me? I'll see to it that this establishment suffers." "And you," he snarled, his gaze fixing menacingly on Sophia, "you just made the biggest mistake of your life." Without waiting for the check, he contemptuously tossed a wad of cash onto the table, far exceeding the bill, apparently, and snatched up his phone. David Miller quickly scrambled after him, whispering frantic apologies to the stunned staff as he went. The two bodyguards, who had stood abruptly when Richard shouted, followed their employer out the door, leaving the entire restaurant in a hushed state of profound disbelief. Sophia stood rooted to the spot, her entire body trembling uncontrollably from the adrenaline rush. Had she truly just done that? The immense weight of her words suddenly hit her, and she wondered if she had gone irrevocably too far. She might very well have lost her job. The true cost of that rebellious sentence might spell imminent financial disaster. But deep down, an ember of fierce pride glowed, warm and steadfast, in her chest. She had spoken truth to power, even if it would cost her absolutely everything. The chilling echo of Richard Sterling's threats lingered oppressively in the dining room long after he had stormed out. People began to whisper amongst one another, some shaking their heads in utter disbelief, others stealing furtive glances at Sophia, who remained standing near table 9, the scattered cash lying across the polished surface like unwanted confetti. It was only then that she realized her eyes were brimming with unshed tears. The immense stress, the raw fear, and the unexpected triumph of that singular, defining moment overwhelmed her completely. Before she could even wipe away her tears, Mr. Harrison stepped forward, followed closely by Chef Antoine Dubois, who had finally emerged from the kitchen. "Sophia," Mr. Harrison said gently, pressing a reassuring hand to her shoulder, "are you okay?" She swallowed hard and nodded, blinking away the lingering tears. "I'm sorry," she managed, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know what came over me." Chef Antoine Dubois spoke up, her voice tinged with both concern and profound admiration. "What came over you," she declared, "was the courage to stand up to a bully. Sophia, I'm proud of you for speaking your truth. But we do have to be prepared for the consequences." Sophia's heart sank with a leaden weight. "I understand if you need to let me go," she murmured, her voice filled with resignation. "I spoke out of turn. I was unprofessional. "Let's not make any rash decisions," Mr. Harrison interjected quickly. "You did what you felt was right. If Mr. Sterling makes good on his threats, we'll have to deal with it then. But for now, take a few minutes to collect yourself." One of the busboys stepped up to clear the table, but Mr. Harrison raised his hand firmly. "No," he said, eyeing the pile of cash Richard had contemptuously flung down. "We'll handle that carefully. The check was never finalized. This is complicated." Sophia, too shaken to deal with the intricate financial logistics of the situation, simply nodded. I'll step outside for a moment." She made her way to the back exit, escaping into the quiet alley where the restaurant disposed of its trash. Under the soft, solitary glow of a single street lamp, she leaned against the cold brick wall and inhaled the crisp night air, filling her lungs. Her mind whirled with 100 tormenting questions. How would she manage to pay her bills if she lost this job? What about Lily's beloved dance lessons? Had she just irrevocably shattered her entire future with one impulsive sentence? Yet, amidst the swirling vortex of fear, she felt an undeniable, profound sense of relief. For once, she hadn't merely swallowed her dignity whole. She'd courageously stood up for herself, and by implicit proxy, for every server, cashier, receptionist, or sales clerk who had ever been dehumanized by someone wielding wealth as a weapon. She was startled by a gentle voice. Turning, Sophia found one of her co-workers, a fellow waitress named Maria, hovering hesitantly in the doorway. Maria, a kind soul in her early 40s, had been at the Metropolitan for years. She offered Sophia a comforting, sympathetic smile. "Some of the customers asked for you," Maria said softly. "They wanted to thank you for what you did." "Thank me?" Sophia asked, genuinely surprised. "But I probably just ruined the restaurant's reputation, and my own." Maria shrugged, a gesture of understanding. "You said what everyone was thinking. The way he treated you was awful. He was acting like he owned the world. A lot of us have been there, dealing with entitled customers. It's refreshing to see someone push back." Sophia exhaled, a shaky but somewhat reassured breath. She gave a small nod. "I'll be back in, but I need a minute. Can you let Mr. Harrison know?" "Of course," Maria said with a supportive smile. Then she ducked back inside, leaving Sophia to gather her turbulent thoughts in solitude. As she stood there in the crisp night air, she thought of Lily. Her daughter had always looked up to her, fiercely proud that her mother was a dancer and a hard-working waitress. Sophia tried to imagine explaining her actions to Lily. Could she truly say, "Mommy lost her job because she wouldn't let a mean man talk down to her"? A lone tear slipped down her cheek, and she quickly brushed it away, steeling herself with a new resolve. If she had to start over, she would, but at least she had bravely looked that bully in the eye and adamantly refused to let him trample her spirit. Eventually, she returned to the dining room. Though she felt utterly drained and hollowed out, she meticulously put on a professional face to finish her shift. She apologized sincerely to the anniversary couple for the disturbance, but they were gracious, warmly telling her she was an inspiration for standing up for herself. The art dealers expressed similar sentiments of support. Even the solitary diner paused his reading long enough to discreetly slip her an extra, generous tip. Word had obviously spread rapidly about what had transpired. "I'm proud of you," one older woman whispered, gripping Sophia's hand warmly as she left. "We need more women who speak their minds." Yet, for every supportive gesture, there was an underlying current of palpable tension among the staff. Everyone wondered anxiously how the owners would react when they heard about the explosive scene. Would they side with the young waitress who risked the restaurant's good graces with an influential millionaire, or would they prioritize damage control at her undeniable expense? By the end of the night, as the last table was cleared and the heavy doors were securely locked, Sophia felt emotionally spent, utterly depleted. She dragged herself into the staff locker room to change, half expecting Mr. Harrison to appear and hand her a dreaded pink slip. But he never came. Instead, the only person who entered was Chef Antoine Dubois. "Sit, Sophia," she said, gesturing to the small bench against the wall. "I wanted to speak with you before you went home." Sophia sank onto the bench, her stomach churning with a fresh wave of anxiety. Chef Antoine Dubois sat beside her, a sympathetic expression softening her usually stern features. "Sophia," she began, "you made quite the impression tonight. Many of our regulars are already telling me how deeply they respect you, and I do too." A lump formed painfully in Sophia's throat. "Thank you," she managed, her voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot. But what about Richard Sterling? His threats weren't empty. He's one of the wealthiest men in the city. He could ruin the Metropolitan's reputation, or sue us, or—" Chef Antoine Dubois nodded gravely. "We'll see what happens. For now, management hasn't asked for your resignation, and as far as I know, they're not planning to. In fact, Mr. Harrison hinted that the owners might want to take a very different approach. There's a lot of support for you, more than you might realize. I suggest you go home, rest, and wait to hear from them tomorrow." A wave of profound relief washed over Sophia, though she couldn't fully relax her tense muscles. "Thank you, Chef," she whispered, tears brimming in her eyes again. The older woman patted her hand gently. "Go home. Hug your daughter. Tomorrow's another day, and we'll face it together if need be." Sophia nodded, packed up her few belongings, and left the restaurant. She hopped on the subway back to Queens, her mind still spinning with the events of the evening. As she looked out at the flickering tunnel lights, she couldn't help but ponder the far-reaching consequences of her actions. Tomorrow would undoubtedly bring either hope or doom, or perhaps even both, but for now, she clung fiercely to a small, defiant sense of victory. She had no idea her words would soon become a viral sensation. When Sophia awoke the next morning, her phone was vibrating incessantly on her bedside table, a relentless buzzing. She groaned, glancing at the clock. 6:30 a.m., an ungodly hour for a Sunday. Sliding her finger across the screen, she saw a barrage of text messages, missed calls, and notifications from social media apps she rarely even opened. Her pulse jumped with alarm. What on earth was happening? She unlocked her phone to find a literal flood of messages, some from coworkers at the Metropolitan, others from friends she hadn't spoken to in years, and even from completely unknown numbers. Urgent words jumped out at her. "OMG. You're trending. Are you okay? That was so brave. Call me ASAP." Her heart hammered violently as she scrolled through various social media feeds. She was tagged in multiple posts. One particular video, shaky, grainy footage captured from a patron's phone, showed Richard Sterling angrily berating her in the restaurant, then precisely captured the pivotal moment when she uttered the single sentence that left the entire room stunned: "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." The clip abruptly ended with Richard's outraged departure, followed by the tentative applause that had spread through the dining room. Already, the video had garnered hundreds of thousands of views on X, formerly Twitter, and Instagram, with comments pouring in at breakneck speed. Finally, Someone stood up to that jerk millionaire. Go, waitress. Respect. I want to find her and give her a medal. Richard Sterling is a known tyrant. Good for her. There were detractors too, of course, who vehemently insisted that Sophia was out of line, that a server should never, under any circumstances, speak to a patron like that, especially someone who possessed the power to ruin their life. But the overwhelming majority seemed overwhelmingly supportive. Hashtags like #YouCan'tBuyDecency trended rapidly throughout the morning. Sophia felt dizzy with anxiety, a swirling vortex of apprehension. She had never, ever asked for this kind of attention. What if the owners of the Metropolitan saw it and decided she was a liability? What if Richard Sterling launched a defamation lawsuit? She was just a single mom trying to make ends meet, not a freedom fighter ready to battle a tech titan. Still in her pajamas, she paced the narrow living room, a restless energy coursing through her, while Lily, still half asleep, wandered out of her makeshift bedroom. Rubbing her eyes, her daughter innocently asked, "Mommy, why are you up so early?" Sophia plastered on a bright, reassuring smile. "Don't worry about it, sweet pea," she said, gently kissing her on the forehead. "How about I make us some pancakes before we do anything else today?" Lily's eyes lit up with delight. "Yes, please. With chocolate chips." "Of course," Sophia said softly. While she whisked the pancake batter, her phone continued its relentless buzzing on the countertop. She received a call from Maria, who sounded breathless with excitement. "You have no idea what's going on," Maria exclaimed. "The owners just called an emergency meeting with the entire staff for noon today. Rumor has it reporters are calling the restaurant non-stop, trying to get your name. It's crazy." Sophia's stomach sank once more. "Do you think they'll fire me?" Maria hesitated, a brief silence. "I don't know. But I do know we're all rooting for you. Customers have been calling too, praising what you did. Hang in there." Sophia thanked her and set the phone aside, focusing intently on flipping pancakes as if her very life depended on it. After breakfast, she dressed Lily and brought her to her friend Chloe's place, who often watched Lily when Sophia had short-notice obligations. She confided in Chloe about the bewildering situation, and Chloe, always the optimist, reassured her that everything would somehow work out. It was with trembling hands and a racing heart that Sophia arrived at the Metropolitan just before noon. A small throng of persistent reporters and eager cameramen hovered outside the entrance, brandishing microphones and cameras with an almost aggressive zeal. She recognized the distinctive logos of local news stations, and her chest tightened with a fresh wave of dread. How had this spiraled so quickly, so uncontrollably? One of the reporters spotted her. Miss. Is it true you're the waitress who stood up to Richard Sterling? Can you tell us what happened?" Sophia lowered her gaze and attempted to slip past them unnoticed. She desperately did not want to make any statement that could potentially worsen her already precarious situation. Mr. Harrison was at the door, ushering her in quickly. "Good to see you," he murmured. "Just head to the private dining room in the back. The meeting's about to start." Inside, every single member of the staff was already seated: bartenders, servers, chefs, busboys, and hosts. The tension in the room was palpable, thick in the air. At the head of the room stood Mr. Harrison, the restaurant's general manager, and Eleanor Vance, the majority owner of the Metropolitan. Sophia had only seen Eleanor Vance once before, during a special event. Eleanor was a tall, elegantly poised woman in her mid-50s, with silver hair meticulously twisted into a sleek, shiny chignon. Her posture exuded an innate confidence, and her cool blue eyes effortlessly commanded the room's undivided attention. When Sophia entered, heads universally turned, and she felt a deep flush creep up her neck. She quietly slipped into a seat near the back. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began. "Thank you all for coming in on short notice. As you're all probably aware by now, a video involving an incident at our restaurant last night has gone viral. While this has put our establishment under sudden media scrutiny, we need to address this situation professionally and collaboratively." He glanced at Eleanor Vance, who stepped forward. "The Metropolitan has always prided itself on excellence," she said, her voice clear and resonant. "Not just in our cuisine, but also in our service. However, we also believe profoundly in treating our staff with dignity. We do not condone the mistreatment of our employees by anyone, regardless of wealth or influence." A low murmur rippled through the staff, a collective exhale of surprise and relief. Sophia's heart fluttered with a tentative hope at Eleanor Vance's powerful statement. Was it truly possible that the restaurant's management actually stood behind her? Eleanor Vance's gaze scanned the room until it found Sophia. "Sophia," she said, her voice gentle yet firm. "Please come forward." A profound hush fell once more. Sophia's stomach knotted painfully as she rose from her chair and walked slowly toward the front of the room, acutely aware that every eye in the room followed her every hesitant step. "Sophia," Eleanor Vance began, her expression kind. "I've been informed of the full details surrounding last night's event. We've all seen the footage that's been circulating. While we do not usually encourage public confrontations with guests, your response to Mr. Sterling's verbal abuse has sparked a much-needed conversation about the respect and inherent value of service workers. As the owner of the Metropolitan, I believe it is crucial to stand by my staff when they have been attacked unjustly." Sophia swallowed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you, Ms. Vance. I truly appreciate that. I never intended to cause a scene or bring negative press to the restaurant. I just—" "You spoke truth," Eleanor Vance interrupted gently, understanding in her eyes. "I've already been in contact with our legal team in case Mr. Sterling decides to pursue legal action, which we doubt he will. The public sentiment appears to be overwhelmingly in your favor, and any lawsuit on his part would likely cause him more damage in the court of public opinion." A profound wave of relief coursed through Sophia. She hadn't realized just how tense she had been until that liberating moment. Does that mean I still have a job?" Eleanor Vance's lips curved in a knowing, wry smile. "Yes, Sophia, you still have a job. In fact, we'd like to highlight your dedication and poise amid extreme circumstances. However, we must be cautious with the media. We don't want to provoke Mr. Sterling or inflame the situation further. If you receive any press inquiries, please direct them to our public relations department. Understood?" Sophia nodded, tears threatening to spill from her eyes. "Yes, thank you so much. I won't let you down." Eleanor Vance patted her hand gently, then addressed the assembled staff. "For now, if any of you are approached by reporters, please refrain from giving statements. Direct them to us. We will release a formal statement soon. Let's remember that we are a team, and we will treat each other and our patrons with the utmost respect." The staff applauded quietly, a soft, collective sigh of relief, and Mr. Harrison ended the meeting shortly after. While a wave of employees came forward to congratulate or hug Sophia, she stood in a haze of overwhelming relief and lingering anxiety. She'd been granted a reprieve, a second chance, but she knew with chilling certainty that the story was far from over. Richard Sterling might still retaliate, and the world's unrelenting attention remained fixed firmly on her. Still, for the very first time in her life, Sophia felt truly seen, not as an invisible waitress to be stepped on and disregarded, but as a person with a powerful voice and an inherent dignity that could not, under any circumstances, be bought at any price. In the days that swiftly followed, Sophia's life transformed in ways she never could have anticipated. The formal statement issued by the Metropolitan was measured and unequivocally firm. They stood resolutely behind their employee, denounced harassment in no uncertain terms, and assured the public that they would continue to offer world-class dining without compromising the dignity of their dedicated staff. This bold approach ignited a furious flurry of supportive messages across all social media platforms. Her face, captured mid-sentence in that grainy cell phone video, became an undeniable symbol of standing up against toxic entitlement. Hashtags multiplied exponentially. Memes appeared seemingly out of nowhere. Late-night show hosts joked about Richard Sterling's spectacular meltdown, turning his humiliation into public entertainment. A satirical article in the Daily Spoof teasingly proclaimed, "Millionaire outraged that waitress expects basic courtesy, spends $10 million on etiquette book to prove point." Amidst the frenetic media frenzy, calls and emails flooded the restaurant, many from eager journalists relentlessly requesting interviews. Following Eleanor Vance's wise advice, Sophia politely deflected them all, diligently forwarding every inquiry to the PR department. She valiantly tried to maintain her normal routine, taking Lily to school, working her demanding shifts, and dancing with the small, devoted group of students she taught on weekends. But it was profoundly surreal to navigate the swirling media storm while attempting to appear calm and unaffected for her daughter's sake. Then, one late afternoon, as Sophia was finishing an early shift, Mr. Harrison approached her with a slightly bewildered, yet excited, expression. "Sophia," he said, his voice hushed, "there's someone here to see you. He says he's a friend of the owner and has a few words of support." Ms. Vance approved it. She glanced around the bustling room. "Who is it?" He jerked a thumb toward a discreet corner of the bar area, where a tall man in a gray blazer stood with his hands clasped casually. He wore simple jeans and stylish sneakers, and though he tried to look incognito, the face was unmistakable. Sophia blinked, certain she was hallucinating. It was Mr. David Chen. She nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. Mr. David Chen, the renowned philanthropist and tech icon, just standing casually in the Metropolitan's bar area, waiting patiently to talk to her. Are you serious?" she breathed, her voice filled with awe. Mr. Harrison nodded, wide-eyed himself. "Yes." He said Ms. Vance is an old acquaintance of his, and he heard about what happened here. Her mind spun in a dizzying circle. Why would Mr. David Chen want to talk to her? She was just a waitress. Gathering every ounce of her courage, she approached him. Up close, he looked surprisingly down-to-earth, wearing a kind, gentle smile behind unassuming glasses. "Mr. Chen," she managed, her voice tinged with awe and nervousness. I'm Sophia." He extended a warm hand. "Nice to meet you, Sophia," he said warmly. "I hope I didn't cause you any trouble by dropping in. I just wanted to offer some words of encouragement. Ms. Vance told me about the incident with Richard Sterling." He paused, adjusting his glasses thoughtfully. "Sometimes, people with wealth forget about humanity. You, on the other hand, reminded the world that decency is priceless." Sophia's cheeks flushed a deeper red. "I don't know what to say. Thank you. But it was all so unexpected. I really wasn't trying to make a point or go viral." He laughed softly, a genuine, warm sound. That's often how these moments happen. But you should know, I respect your courage. I've dealt with all kinds of corporate bullies in my career. People forget that power and wealth aren't excuses for bad behavior. When Ms. Vance told me your story, I decided I wanted to meet you, if you were willing. She nodded, hardly believing this surreal encounter was real. I appreciate that more than I can express. But aren't you worried about being seen here? The press might. He lifted a hand gently, stopping her. I'm not here to stoke any controversy. I'm just here to say that not everyone with money is like Richard Sterling, and you shouldn't let his actions define how you see people with resources. I also hope you won't let his threats intimidate you. There are many of us who admire your backbone. Honestly, I wish more people spoke up in situations like that. Before Sophia could respond, Eleanor Vance materialized, beaming, her presence radiating pride. She greeted Mr. David Chen with a friendly kiss on each cheek, then turned to Sophia. I see you two have met, she said, her voice filled with a quiet triumph. Sophia, Mr. Chen and I were chatting earlier about a potential philanthropic collaboration. We're looking into how we can help support workers' rights in the hospitality industry. We want to ensure that no one else has to face what you did. A whirlwind of overwhelming emotions swirled in Sophia's chest. She, a girl from Queens who had come to the city with big dreams of dancing and was now a single mom scraping by, was being told that Mr. David Chen and Eleanor Vance wanted to help people just like her. It was utterly surreal. That's incredible, she finally managed, her voice a whispered gasp. I never imagined something like this could come out of that awful night. Eleanor Vance nodded, her eyes bright with vision. Neither did we. But sometimes, adversity shines a spotlight on issues that truly need addressing. We're going to use this momentum to push for better protections and respect for service workers, and we'd love for you to be involved in some capacity. Sophia blinked, overwhelmed. Involved? She couldn't help but laugh nervously. I'm not really an activist. I told a rude millionaire he couldn't buy decency. That's all. Mr. David Chen gave a small chuckle, a warm sound. That one sentence may have changed more than you realize. You see, real social shifts often start with everyday individuals who speak up in one critical moment, and then everyone else realizes they're not alone in how they feel, that they too can speak out. Sophia felt tears prick her eyes again, but this time they were tears of profound wonder and immense gratitude. Well, she said shakily, her voice full of newfound resolve, if there's anything I can do, share my story, give my perspective, I'd be happy to, especially if it helps others in my position. Eleanor Vance and Mr. David Chen both smiled, exchanging knowing glances. We'll be in touch, Eleanor Vance said with the details. But for now, let's celebrate the fact that you're still here, employed, and you've put a spotlight on an important issue. The rest of the conversation felt like a dream, a blur of surreal interactions. Mr. David Chen asked about Lily, about Sophia's dance background, and how she managed to balance her hectic schedule. He listened intently, displaying genuine curiosity and profound kindness, exactly the antithesis of Richard Sterling's brusque entitlement. When he finally left, the entire staff buzzed with excitement, whispering his name in awe. Eleanor Vance made sure the encounter remained discreet, letting Mr. David Chen slip out a side door to avoid the eager press. Within an hour, Sophia was on her way home, her head spinning with the day's events. She still had to pick up Lily from Chloe's and figure out what to make for dinner, but she carried a newfound sense of purpose, buoyed by unexpected allies. The confrontation with Richard Sterling had unleashed a wave of trials, but also a powerful current of compassion and activism that she never imagined possible. Over the following weeks, the media frenzy gradually began to subside, replaced by thoughtful, ongoing conversations about service industry standards. Sophia continued working at the Metropolitan, though she noticed a distinct uptick in curious customers who recognized her from the viral video. Some came purely out of curiosity, hoping to catch a glimpse of the famous waitress, but many arrived with genuine admiration, leaving generous tips and encouraging words. One evening, Eleanor Vance held a private gathering at the Metropolitan, inviting industry leaders, philanthropic personalities, and a few select journalists. The purpose was to officially launch a new initiative. The Dignity Project, a foundation specifically aimed at promoting worker protection, anti-harassment training, and empowerment for service employees. Eleanor Vance introduced Sophia as the unexpected catalyst for the entire movement. Standing at the microphone in the softly lit dining room, wearing her crisp black server's uniform, Sophia felt both terrified and exhilaratingly empowered. She looked out at the diverse crowd. Renowned chefs, restaurateurs, passionate activists, even a few celebrities. Mr. David Chen stood silently alongside Eleanor Vance, nodding in quiet, unwavering support. Sophia took a deep, calming breath. "Good evening," she began, her voice trembling slightly, yet firm. "I never thought I'd be standing here, speaking to a room of such distinguished individuals. A month ago, I was just a waitress trying to provide for my daughter and do my job well. But one night, everything changed. I spoke a single sentence to a powerful man, and it resonated far beyond my station. I've since learned that sometimes, it only takes a moment of courage to highlight a systemic issue, one that affects millions of people in the service industry." She paused, gathering her thoughts, her gaze sweeping across the attentive faces. "I don't stand here to vilify anyone, but I do want to remind everyone that respect is not optional. It's a basic human right. If we can create an environment where no server, cashier, janitor, or housekeeper ever feels powerless against harassment, then we've achieved something far greater than just a viral moment." Applause rose from the audience, gentle but heartfelt, growing in volume. A wave of warmth washed over Sophia, and she smiled, recalling the time she was too shy even to stand up to her dance instructors in college. Now, she was speaking to a room filled with influential figures, urging them to promote decency and respect. After the speeches concluded, the event transformed into a lively cocktail reception. Guests mingled, sampling exquisite hors d'oeuvres crafted by Chef Antoine Dubois. Sophia found herself inundated with handshakes and business cards, a bewildering array of contacts. A high-profile Hollywood actress, known for her activism, approached Sophia and confided, "I wish I had your courage when I was working as a waitress in my early days." An older restaurateur in a white suit nodded solemnly and said, "You reminded me why I got into hospitality in the first place, to serve and to respect people." Later, while sipping a tonic water by the bar, Mr. David Chen approached, giving her a reassuring, encouraging smile. "Well done," he said. "You handled that speech like a pro." She laughed self-consciously. "My legs were shaking the entire time. Public speaking isn't exactly my thing." He raised an eyebrow good-naturedly. "You seemed at ease. Maybe you're a natural." He then glanced at Eleanor Vance, who was engaged in animated conversation with a group of journalists, and lowered his voice. "I wanted to let you know that we, Ms. Vance and I, are considering you for a more formal role in the Dignity Project. Obviously, this would be your choice entirely. We wouldn't want to pressure you, but we think your authentic voice is incredibly valuable." Sophia's eyes widened in disbelief. "A role? As in working for the foundation?" He nodded. "Part-time or full-time, whatever you can manage. We know you have responsibilities with your daughter, and we'd never ask you to quit your job at the Metropolitan if you don't want to. But we'd like you to be an ambassador, a spokesperson of sorts, traveling with us to speak about worker empowerment. We can provide compensation, of course, and we can adapt the schedule around your availability." Her mind reeled with the possibilities. "That sounds amazing, but also terrifying. I've never done anything like that." He offered a kind, understanding smile. "Think about it. Talk it over with your loved ones. The offer stands whenever you're ready." With that, he gave her a friendly nod and slipped away. Sophia exhaled, her thoughts spinning in a dizzying whirlwind. She recalled the day she started at the Metropolitan, how anxious yet hopeful she felt. How far she'd come from that moment. Now she had opportunities she never dreamed of, born from a confrontation she never asked for, but one she bravely faced anyway. Across the room, Chef Antoine Dubois caught her eye and winked, a silent sign of shared understanding. The memory of that infamous night flickered. Richard Sterling shouting, belittling, acting as though he owned the restaurant and every soul in it. She remembered the single sentence she uttered that changed everything: "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." In that defining moment, she realized she'd stumbled into something far bigger than herself. By the time she got home that night, Lily was already asleep in bed. Sophia tiptoed in, gently kissed her daughter's forehead, and headed to her cramped living room, where she sank onto the couch. She looked around at the cozy chaos: dance shoes by the door, Lily's crayons scattered on a table, a hamper of laundry waiting for her in the corner. It was a humble life, but it was hers. Her phone buzzed. She checked the screen to see a notification, an email from Eleanor Vance. Subject line: The Dignity Project follow-up. Heart pounding, she opened it. "Dear Sophia, thank you for your wonderful speech tonight. Enclosed is more information about the formal role we'd like to offer you. Please let me know your thoughts. We believe you can make a real difference. Warm regards, Eleanor Vance." A swirl of hope and apprehension surged through Sophia. She set the phone aside, knowing she needed time to think. Could she truly step into such a role, traveling and speaking publicly? Was it wise to leave or reduce her hours at the Metropolitan, an income she still desperately relied on? Yet, if this opportunity allowed her to better provide for Lily and help millions of other service workers, wasn't it worth considering? She couldn't help but smile, remembering her own powerful words: "You can buy a steak, sir, but you can't buy decency." That moment of spontaneous bravery had opened a door to a new horizon. She didn't know exactly where the path led, but she felt a surge of confidence pulsing through her. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was discovering a purpose she never imagined possible. Life, she realized, had a funny, mysterious way of turning a single sentence into an entire movement. And so ends the story of how a single mom struggling to make ends meet found herself at the epicenter of a culture-shifting moment in one of Manhattan's most prestigious restaurants. Sophia's bold stand against a powerful millionaire began as an unexpected clash, but evolved into a clarion call for respect and dignity in the workplace. From viral social media clips to chance encounters with philanthropists like Mr. David Chen, her journey shows us that one voice, no matter how humble, can spark real change. Will Sophia stay at the Metropolitan or join the Dignity Project full-time? That's a decision she's still weighing. But one thing's clear. She'll never be the same timid waitress who accepted insults quietly. Sometimes it takes just one sentence to reveal who you truly are and transform the world around you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to remember that they're seen, heard, and valued. Like this video if you believe in the power of chosen family, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate the strength found in unexpected places.